start by saying if anybody found 2 pair of glasses, they're mine, so I'm borrowing both these glasses. I had asked to let me speak about my daddy. I'm Janet, the 4th out of the 6. And it's no secret, I was my daddy's favorite, and the others used it to their advantage. But my daddy and I had a special bond, and from the time I was 2 or 3, I can remember sitting on my daddy's lap while he was in his recliner and watching TV, and he smoked at that time, but he quit shortly thereafter. And this was when we lived on Mount Gilead Road, and I can't tell you what we watched or what we talked about, but I do remember him wrapping his arms around me and me sitting in his lap, and he always called me his baby doll. And looking back in recent years, I've come to appreciate how good a daddy was, and it's a wonder because he didn't have a daddy, he didn't have a relationship. My grandfather Anders died prior to my daddy being born. And so he was raised by his grandmother, my grandmother Anders, and his Aunt Blodwin. Daddy kept busy with his medical profession, which was compounded because he covered the practice for Mama's patients too, so she could be with us. But he still spent time with us. I can remember him taking us to see Swiss Family Robinson at the Westgate Theater, and he gave me a quarter to get refreshments. I dropped it, it rolled down the aisle, and that's why I remember that. Sometimes on Saturdays he would take us bowling, and I can remember going to get pizza afterwards. And he made it to my father-daughter banquet for my Girl Scout troop. I remember he was late, but he got the baby delivered and made it there in time. I remember one time when we went out looking at Christmas lights, and of course there's 6 of us in the station wagon with Mom and Daddy. And Daddy was always stern, so we were on our best behavior around Daddy. We didn't want to get in trouble. But for some reason, we were misbehaving, and my guess is it was the crowded station wagon or a brother egging it on. And we didn't settle down, so Daddy finally stopped and pulled over, and he lined us all up, got us out of the car, and spanked us and put us back in the car, and he said, "Now, have a good time!" I can remember another time when it was pouring down rain and I was driving and I was 15 and I wanted to pull over. I was scared to death and he would not let me. He made me drive. He said, "You've got to learn how to drive in any kind of circumstances." And he was real good about preparing us for life in those kind of ways. I liked going to the lot, which is now where our house was on 314, because we would help him clean out under the pecan tree and get the brush, and then we'd stop at Burger King on the way home and get a Whopper, and that was a big deal. Another favorite memory I have is on Christmas. It was memorable because we would each get to open one present, and then Daddy would sometimes show videos from previous Christmases, and he also would sing Silent Night in German, and that was especially, we'd see a side of him we hadn't seen before. All of us have a special love for Daytona Beach because it became a tradition for us to go there for our vacation during the summertime. He'd drive up and down the beach and let us sit on the tailgate. I remember falling off one time. And he bought floats for us and we'd play out in the ocean. And one time when he was out deep on his own, he got too far out and had to be rescued by the lifeguard, which we all enjoyed, but it hurt his pride. But he was kind of glad to get rescued. The one thing I hated about vacation, and no, it wasn't sitting between Daddy and Aunt Blodwin when we didn't have air conditioning right down to Daytona, but was Daddy had a time called FOB time, flat on back, and he would make us take a rest time every afternoon. And we felt like it was the biggest waste of time because we could be at the ocean, and so Daddy tried to convince us that every afternoon the ocean was drained and that we wouldn't miss anything, and of course we couldn't prove it because he wouldn't take us to the ocean to prove it. Daddy and Mama were good providers for us, and we could have been spoiled, but instead Daddy instilled a strong work ethic in each of us. As children, we each had a day to take the trash out, and if we did it on our Sunday, we got our one soda that we got each week. Now, I drink one soda by 9 o'clock in the morning. When we go to Lake St. Clair, we had to pick up pine cones and fill up the trash can to put in the ruts of the drive that led to Aunt Carolyn's trailer. And for every pine cone trash can we turned in, we would get one loop at the lake behind the boat with the skis or the board. So that was one way he limited how many times he had to do it. We each had Saturday morning chores, and then of course once we moved to Fayette County, there was plenty of grass to cut, and we'd work in the garden weeding it. Daddy taught me to make pickles and to can vegetables, and he was a firm believer that when you finished a chore, you put things back where you got them. My first job was working for Daddy in his office. I worked as his medical assistant, and at times I would do secretary work too. And then later when I became a nurse at South Fulton, I worked in the labor and delivery with Daddy. And I could tell that he was highly respected by the hospital staff and the fellow physicians because as they would tell him I was Dr. Andrews' daughter, I certainly got treated better than some of the other employees. I always got the doctors that were hard to manage because they weren't like that with me. I enjoyed taking care of Daddy's patients and getting to see him deliver babies. He truly enjoyed his work for most of his career, and his patients loved him despite his scolding them about their weight. There was a posting in the paper in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about someone that he delivered their baby in North Carolina, and someone was telling Mama today about how he saved the life of their baby when it was delivered. He was delivered. In 1982, Mark married Chris Creasy in September, and then Buffy married Mark Dupuy in October. I had just gotten my first car, and Tim rode across country in my little Honda to the wedding, and coming back, Daddy and Mama rode with me. And I think Daddy kind of enjoyed driving it because he eventually ended up buying him one. But we stopped and saw the Grand Canyon, and I can remember having one of my best dates in Oklahoma City with him. A week after we got home, Abe Banks called my daddy at his office and said he wanted to come talk to him. And I don't think my daddy wanted to talk to him. That night, when Daddy got home and before I headed to work, because I was working night shift, Daddy sat me down on the couch and he wanted to know, and I remember exactly, what it was about this character, Abe Banks, I liked so much. And I had never admitted to my daddy at that point that I loved Abe, so I had to explain, how I felt about it. And I called Abe after he talked to me and I said, Abe, I don't think Daddy likes us dating. And little did I know that there was a proposal coming. And I mentioned to my children that the preacher that married Abe and I was going to be speaking today, and they said, is he still alive? We just celebrated our 31st anniversary. But Ike was young like us. So. In January of this year, when the family was approached about getting hospice involved, we knew that the end was near. We began to plan Daddy's funeral, and Buffy has spent days researching and doing the sideshow and the biography and the obituary. And just watching those pictures made me realize a different side about my daddy. The one that really grabbed me was the one where he was in the Navy in his pajamas studying. And he wasn't, he was 17 when he went in the Navy. And he had a rough childhood, but he never spoke of it that way. He enjoyed all that was going on. And on Monday, when I got word that Daddy was close to death, Abe had just come out of surgery, having surgery on his ankle. And I was going to just wait 24 hours, and Abe said, no, you need to go, this is your daddy. So Sarah and I went to Peachtree City to check on Daddy, and I ended up having an hour or so alone with him. And I sat by the side of his bed, and Sarah was sitting at the foot, and I'm crying, and I'm holding his hand, and I'm thinking, I've got to memorize how this hand is soft and strong, and I just wanted to make sure I remembered that. And after they had all left to eat, I was sitting on the bed, and there was a cushion between me and my daddy, and I asked the nursing assistant, could I put my head on his shoulder, and she said, honey, that's your daddy, you can climb up in the bed if you want to. So she moved things around, and I climbed up in the bed with him, and I put my head on his shoulder, and I just had my talk with him. And of course, I don't know if you heard me or not, but I felt like he did. And I thanked him for leading me to the Lord when I was 10 years old. I told him he was a good daddy. I promised him we would all take care of Mama. He didn't have that as a worry. And I said, I know you're tired and you've earned heaven and you need to go on and go. It's your time. And I told him I'd look forward to seeing him again someday, that I could have that hope. And I did mention to him that we had planned his funeral and that I wish he could be here to hear it because he was going to be such a saint. I sang Amazing Grace, and I included the lines that made me think of him for 2 years. Every time I've heard the song, I've cried thinking of him about my chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like the flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Life had come full circle. My first memories were sitting in his lap with my head on his chest, and here I was again, snuggled up next to him, listening to his heartbeat. I've cried my share of tears that last few days, but I am so thankful for my tears, because if I hadn't experienced his love, I wouldn't have those tears. And as Daddy would say, such is life.